In the cold expanse of the galaxy, where stars are born only to die in silence, one voice returns from the void, not to rule, not to conquer, but to remember. Long before the Imperium of Man drew its first breath, before even the ruinous gods whispered lies into the warp, there stood a race of living flesh, cursed by the cruel kiss of their own dying stars. They were the Necrontyr. Their bodies were frail, brittle as the bones of ancient trees, and they lived beneath a sky that scorned them, bathed in radiation that promised slow, agonizing decay. A race born not just into suffering, but into resentment. And as their flesh withered, their minds burned, ambitious, brilliant, desperate for escape. From this bitter soil, one voice rose above all others. Szarekh, the Silent King. He was not crowned through bloodshed, nor chosen by chance. He was a culmination of their desperation, an intellect that could unify their fractious dynasties, a sovereign not a pride, but a burden. His silence was not a weakness. It was the weight of command, a silence deeper than space, forged by centuries of watching his people crumble under their own stars. He did not speak much, because when he finally did, empires moved. Under Szarekh, the Necron looked outward, toward the galaxy, toward dominion, toward vengeance against the old ones, the ancient near-immortal Xenos who held the galaxy in their claws, shepherding younger races like pets. The Necrontyr saw it as an insult, a prison of flesh, a curse of time. They sought ascension not through enlightenment but annihilation, and that is when the Tan came. They were not gods, not truly, but to mortal minds they may as well have been star-born entities, colossal in form and incomprehensible in thought, beings that fed upon the radiation of the stars themselves. The Necrontyr called them the Star Gods. It was Szarekh who led the pact. What choice did he have? His people were dying. Their wars against the Old Ones had proven futile. The Tan offered something no science, no dynasty, no hope of war ever could. Immortality, not in theory. In truth, freedom from the curse of biology. A new form, eternal, indestructible. The price? Their flesh, their souls. Biotransference, they called it. The Necrontyr gathered by the billions. Their minds downloaded into cold machines. Their bodies rendered to ash. The screaming stopped not because it ceased, but because their vocal cords were gone. The pain remained echoing in neural circuits, buried beneath protocols of obedience. When Szarekh walked among his new people, the Necrons, they did not cheer. They did not speak. They watched in silence, like statues. All that remained was logic, precision, obedience, and the faintest whisper of horror behind glowing emerald eyes. The Silent King had damned them all. He had bought immortality with their souls, and in doing so, created something worse than death. A race without joy, without sorrow, without memory, only the endless ticking of time and duty. He did not celebrate their new dominion. He did not bask in the fall of the old ones. He stared into the faces of his immortal children and saw what he had done. And so, he turned inward. He who once silenced the galaxy now could not silence the echo in his own mind. What is a ruler without the trust of his people? What is eternity if your soul is hollow? The Necrons obeyed, yes, but they no longer loved. They no longer dreamed. They no longer truly lived. And Szarekh, forever bound to them by guilt, would speak no more. In the centuries that followed, his armies ravaged the galaxy. The Tan feasted on creation. The old ones fell and stars wept. But Szarekh's eyes never burned with triumph. He had won his war. He had killed the gods. But he had lost everything else. His silence was no longer a symbol. It was a wound, and like the cold between galaxies, it only deepened with time. Pause here. Breathe. Because the tragedy of the Silent King is not that he failed his people. It is that he succeeded. And tomorrow, 10 million years from that moment, he will awaken again, but not to rule, not to conquer, to remember. What would you sacrifice to escape death? Your body? Your people? Your very soul? Before the galaxy knew of angels or demons, before mankind even kindled fire beneath Terran skies, there was a deal struck in the blackness between suns. It did not begin with thunder, nor end in fire. It began in desperation, a deal born of sorrow, sealed in silence, and written in the annihilation of flesh. The Necrontyr had waged a war they could not win. The Old Ones, ancient, near-omnipotent beings with mastery over the webway, the warp, and the secrets of life, had held dominion over the stars for countless eons. The Necrontyr, though brilliant, were still prisoners of material. Their science was potent, but their mortality was chains. They hated the Old Ones not only for their power, but for the insult of it. Immortal shepherds watching while proud, dying race clawed through dust for meaning. And Szarekh, the Silent King, had watched his people die for centuries. Children born only to rot. Cities built only to crumble. Dynasties fueled by bitterness, fracturing into rivalries, schisms, and civil war. But it was not war or envy that broke him. It was hope. Hope that flickered, then failed. And in that ruin of hope, the Tan arrived. They did not come with diplomacy or promise. They came with wonder. The Necron had observed them for years. Colossal entities gliding to the void, feeding upon solar winds and stellar fire. They called them in the oldest tongue, star vampires, fragment of the universe itself, born in the birth screams of the cosmos. And then one made contact. It did not speak as mortals do. It hummed in frequencies of madness and awe, a being of crystalline perfection and living energy. It did not lie, for such creatures did not need to. The truth alone was enough to tempt. It promised Szarekh everything. Immortality, power to rival the Old Ones, a new form for the Necrontyr, a form without pain, without death, without the cruel judgment of time. Biotransference. It sounded scientific. Clean, a technical evolution, the next step. But what followed was not evolution. It was mutilation. With Szarekh's reluctant approval, the Necrontyr assembled across their tomb worlds. Massive furnaces were constructed, machines the size of cities, powered by arcane sciences older than understanding. One by one, Necrontyr citizens were herded inside, told they would emerge reborn. And they did, but not as they were. What came out were the Necrons, gleaming skeletal forms of living metal, animated by a soul scream trapped in quantum matrices. Their minds were downloaded, their emotions filtered, their individuality reduced to code. Szarekh had trusted the process. He had believed that his people would retain themselves, only free from decay. But he had misunderstood the price. The Tan did not care for the Necrontyr. They feasted on the psychic agony of the biotransference process. Every moment of fear, every death rattle, every shattered soul, it nourished them. The Necrontyr did not simply die. They were consumed. Their essence, their spark, their spiritual core devoured. The Necrons were what remained. And Szarekh watched. He watched the laughter disappear. He watched the faces he had known become silent masks of metal. He watched their children's voices fall silent. No cries, no rebellion, just obedience. But he could not undo what had been done. The process was irreversible. The pact sealed. The star gods had given him victory, and it tasted like ash. The Necrons, soulless, undying, tireless, were now the greatest force in the galaxy, with the Tan leading them. They swept across systems like living extinction events. The Old Ones, powerful as they were, began to falter. The war shifted. What once was resistance became retreat. Worlds were lost. Stars died. And still the Tan feasted. But Szarekh had changed. He who had once burned for vengeance now burned with something else. Regret. Not all the Necrons retained their minds. Many had been reduced to automatons, lifeless husks of thoughtless servitude. But others, like his nobles, like himself, remembered. And memory is a cruel master. Szarekh saw what they had become. Immortal, yes. Powerful, yes. But empty. Where once the Necroner had argued, created, sung, and loved, now there was silence. A civilization of ghosts in metal skin. And above them, gloating, the Tan fed upon their legacy. The silent king did not speak, but he felt, in his core, beyond even the cold algorithms of his new mind, something deeper screamed. He had led them here. He had made the choice. And now his people were damned. Yet still the war raged. And still the Tan demanded more. But deep within his throne world, in the endless silence of thought, Szarekh began to plot, not against the old ones, not against the galaxy, but against the gods he had unleashed. He would not speak. He would not mourn. He would act, because even if his people had no souls left to save, he could still avenge them. You cannot kill a god, but you can break it. The galaxy convulsed in agony. What had begun as a desperate alliance had become genocide on a cosmic scale. Led by the Tan, the Necrons became executioners of reality. Stars dimmed at their passing. Planets were flens of life like flesh from bone. The old ones, once the architects of the galaxy's order, now found themselves hunted like vermin, their creations shattered, their labyrinthine webways torn apart. And at the heart of this devastation walked Szarekh, the silent king, crowned in silence, cloaked in remorse. Watching as the dream of salvation he bartered was twisted into a nightmare. He had traded mortality for damnation. He had traded suffering for slavery. And now, even the throne upon which he sat felt like a tomb. But Szarekh was no longer a desperate ruler. He was a tactician with eternity to burn, and a mind as cold and vast as the void. The star gods, the Tan, believed the Necrons to be theirs. Servants, weapons, sustenance. They had not foreseen Zarekh's quiet rebellion. It began in whispers, carried not by breath, but by code. A secret protocol embedded within the command matrices of high-ranking Necron nobles. He could not ignite an open revolt. The Tan were too powerful, too ancient, too vast. But they had made one mistake. They had underestimated what remained in the Necron mind. A flicker of thought, a kernel of hatred, a spark Szarekh had not entirely extinguished. Those who retained their consciousness, overlords, cryptex, lords of entire dynasties, began to awaken to a new purpose. Not revenge against the old ones, not conquest of the stars, but the destruction of their so-called gods. It began slowly. The Nightbringer, the most terrible of the Tan, had grown gluttonous. Across dozens of sectors, its hunger became erratic, its form destabilized as it gorged itself on the essence of billions. And that's when Szarekh struck. They did not face the Tan in open battle. That would be suicide. Instead, they used their science, their precision, their understanding of the very quantum mechanics that once bound their souls. They lured the Nightbringer into a false campaign, offering it a world brimming with prey. And when it arrived, the trap was sprung. Tesseract labyrinths, devices capable of bending space and sealing entities of near-limitless energy, were activated in a perfect symphony of timing and betrayal. The Nightbringer screamed. Stars flickered. Worlds trembled. But it was too late. It was broken. Not destroyed, for that was impossible, but shattered. Its form splintered into thousands of shards, each a fragment of its once unfathomable self. Trapped, contained, bound, and Szarekh watched. One god undone, and it would not be the last. The Tan, once revered, now fell one by one. Their betrayal had been absolute, but so too was Szarekh's revenge. Each star god, no matter how incomprehensible, could be fractured, disassembled like equations of pain. The deceiver, master of lies. The void dragon, who feasted on matter. The burning one, who scorched time itself. Each one was shattered, each one caged, each one betrayed by the very hands that once worshipped them. It was not justice. It was not redemption. It was retribution. The Necrons reclaimed their will, if not their souls, their voices, if not their songs. A new purpose burned within their mechanical hearts. Not freedom, for they would never be free, but control, the war against the old ones. Meanwhile, collapsed into chaos, cornered and desperate, the old ones turned to creations of their own, races with untapped psychic potential. They seeded the Eldari, who would become the Eldar. They uplifted the Krork, ancestors of the Orcs. They tried to weaponize life itself to halt the Necron tide. It was too late. The galaxy fractured into a million battlefronts, with no victor, only survivors. The Necrons had shattered the gods. The old ones had fractured reality. And into this maelstrom came the warp's awakening. The psychic resonance of the old ones' chosen races, combined with the cataclysm of galactic war, stirred the immaterium into a storm. Emotions twisted into entities. Thought became predator. The demons of the warp began to rise. It was no longer a war of matter. It was madness incarnate. And Szarekh saw what he had wrought. Not just death, but unraveling. He had traded one apocalypse for another, and now, for the first time in untold eons, the silent king stood before the infinite night and felt small. His revenge was complete. His people were victorious. And yet, they were still broken. The gods were gone, but so were their souls. There was no enemy left to fight, no destiny left to shape, only silence. And so, Szarekh, the mind behind galactic extinction, the liberator of a soulless race, the killer of gods, made a final decision. The stars would no longer hear his voice. He would abandon his throne. He would sever the command protocols that made him king. He would vanish into the void between galaxies, not to hide, not to rule, to wander, to remember, to suffer in solitude, and perhaps to dream of redemption in a galaxy that no longer knew his name. What does an immortal dream of when even time itself grows weary? There is a silence in the void that even the gods dare not name. It is a silence of choice made too late, of consequences too vast to outrun. It is the silence Szarekh embraced when he turned from the galaxy he had shattered, when he stepped away from the throne forged in pain, and into a darkness no stars could touch. The war in heaven was over. The old ones had fled, perished, or been torn apart by the very psychic storms they tried to harness. Their creations, unready and unstable, began to proliferate wildly, sowing chaos across the stars. The Tan, once feared and worshipped, were now fragments locked in vaults of impossible geometry. The Necrons had triumphed, and yet there was no celebration, no monuments, no victory. The Necrons were not a people anymore. They were a mechanism, an engine left running long after the purpose of its design had been forgotten. Their minds were rigid, their memories faded. Only the higher echelons, the pharaons, overlords, cryptex, and Szarekh himself, retained enough clarity to grieve. And they did grieve, for in their victory, they saw the full horror of what they had become. Each tomb world was a crypt not just for their past, but for their souls. Entire civilizations locked away, dreaming in static. Golden palaces are now halls of dust. Statues of great scientists, philosophers, poets, now nothing more than data constructs without purpose. Szarekh saw it all. He wandered from tomb world to tomb world. His court diminished, his command protocol severed. None dared stop him. They couldn't, for though he had shed his throne, the echo of his will still move through the neural lattice of the Necron race. They obeyed his silence, and in that silence, he saw their tragedy laid bare. Some Necrons had gone mad. Fused too deeply with the machine, their personalities eroded into madness. Some wandered aimlessly, caught in memory loops, reliving echoes of lives that no longer existed. Others stood eternally still, locked in eternal readiness for orders that would never come. There was no war left to fight, no cause to serve, only decay. And so the Silent King made a final decree. The galaxy was now too unstable. The warp screamed louder with every passing century. The Necrons, for all their power, were out of time. The lesser races, the Eldari, the Krork, the nascent human tribes, were multiplied like spores, guided by the whispers of gods they did not understand. Szarekh saw the pattern. A second catastrophe loomed. Another age of fire and madness. And so, with infinite precision, he ordered the final protocol. The Great Sleep. One by one, Tomb World were sealed. Stasis crypts activated. Systems wound down into silence. Machines slumbered. Time itself slowed to crawl inside chambers designed to endure the collapse of stars. The Necrons would wait, for millions of years, if necessary, until the galaxy stabilized, until they could rise again. But not Szarekh. He would not sleep. He had no right to forget. He had no right to escape. With only a small retinue of Triarch Praetorians, he left the galaxy entirely, drifting into the intergalactic void where even the warp could not reach, beyond the influence of stars, beyond even the faintest breath of life. There, in the black between galaxies, he floated, alone, silent, and thought. For 10 million years, he watched galaxies collide and spiral. He saw suns die in silence, their light never reaching a single living eye. He saw new races rise from dust and crumble again into ash, all from afar, a witness to time itself. And in that solitude, he was forced to confront the truth that no dynasty ever dared speak. He had not been tricked by the Tan. Not really. He had known the cost. He had seen the desperation in the eyes of his people, and he had chosen to play God, to gamble their souls for survival. And they had survived, but they were no longer themselves. He had preserved their minds in cages, trapped their hopes in steel, killed their gods, and became the warden of a people who could never again be free. He had broken the Tan, but not the curse. It clung to him like frost. The memory of laughter, the warmth of breath, the feeling of sunlight on a decaying body, before all of that was stripped away and replaced by the cold logic of immortality. Somewhere, deep within his quantum-anchored mind, Szarekh asked a question. Could he fix it? Was there a path to redemption? Could the Necrons be made whole again? And if not, could something be done to stop the next great fall? Because as the warp grew louder, as demons clawed at the fabric of reality, as the races bore the old ones danced unknowingly toward their doom, Szarekh began to feel it. The galaxy was breaking again. The cycle would repeat. But perhaps, just perhaps, if he returned, if he rose again, if he could face what he had once fled, he might yet save them. Not as a king, not as a god, but as a penitent. And so, after 10 million years of silence, the Silent King turned back toward the galaxy, toward his people, toward a future he no longer ruled, but would not abandon. Because redemption, even for a soul of living metal, must begin with remembrance. He left the galaxy in silence. He returns to it and screams. 10 million years had passed. Civilizations had risen, fallen, and turned to dust. Empires that believed themselves eternal had been swallowed by the void. New gods had emerged from the warp, stitched from the madness and worship of younger races. Demons whispered in the shadows. Humanity burned across the stars like wildfire, blind, beautiful, and already doomed. But now, in the dark heart of the galaxy, something ancient stirs. Not chaos, not divinity. Memory. The void ripples. A signal echoes. A forgotten protocol reawakens within tombs once thought forever sealed. And across the stars, the name returns, not spoken but felt. A presence behind the veil of time. A mind vast enough to command 1,000 dynasties, and sorrowful enough to mourn each one. Szarekh, the Silent King. He returns, but not as the same being who left. What emerges from a void is not the desperate monarch who signed the pact with the Tan. It is not the calculating warlord who shattered star gods. It is not even the silent exile who watched galaxies die in isolation. It is all of them and more. Szarekh returns to a galaxy that has forgotten him, but one still shaped by his sins. The Necrons stir once more from their tombs, each awakening a fractured echo of their former selves. Some rise in madness, others in apathy, others are on fire, and above them, Szarekh arrives not to reclaim dominion, but to restore purpose, to right what once was broken, and perhaps to prepare for what is coming. He lands upon a lifeless world. The sands ripple at his step. The air hums with the frequency of long-dead empires. Behind him, his court of Triarch Praetorians, unchanged in loyalty, even across eons, stand in absolute stillness. They speak no words. They require none. For when the Silent King returns, even silence bows. He does not issue commands. He activates the command protocols, re-establishing his neural resonance across the ancient web of Necron communication. Pharaons, overlords, cryptechs, all hear the call, not in sound, but in the stirrings of their core logic. The Triarch breathes again. The dynasties realign, but the galaxy is not the same. This is not the age of Necron dominance. It is the age of the Imperium, of the ruinous powers, of endless war and flickering light. And Szarekh sees the cancer spreading. He sees the Imperium of man, powerful, stubborn, barely surviving under the rotting corpse of its emperor. He sees the warp storms thickening, devouring systems with madness. He sees the orcs multiply without end. He sees the Eldari withering. He sees the Tyranids approaching, a hunger from beyond the stars. And he knows this is not the time for conquest. It is the time for preservation, not of others, of his own. For the Necrons are not prepared for this age. Their minds have atrophied. Many tomb worlds have decayed beyond function. Their once immortal forms rust beneath gravity's slow poison. Dynasties feud in forgotten rituals, their protocols fraying. Szarekh walks among them now, not as a god, but as a father to a wounded species. He begins not with war, but repair, re-establishing command hierarchies, reconciling feuding lords, retrieving lost data cores, and repairing planetary infrastructure that predates even memory. But he is not naive. He knows war is inevitable, and he prepares for it, not as a conqueror, but as a surgeon prepares for amputation. In secret, he reforms the Triarch, 3 voices to guide the race, himself and 2 high-ranking nobles of vision and clarity. It is not democracy. It is not tyranny. It is design, balanced not by faith, but by logic and consequence. He also does the unthinkable. He seeks alliances. He watches the Imperium, not out of envy, but curiosity. He sees in the Emperor something he once resembled, a ruler burdened by sacrifice, bound by impossible duty. He sees the humans as dangerous, but not evil, not like the warp. That cancer, those gods of madness, must never be allowed to fully devour reality. The Necrons have no stake in faith, no gods to serve, but they know madness. They were born of it. and they will not surrender the galaxy to it. And so, Szarekh walks again, not just among his own, but into the stars where danger festers. He makes contact with other dynasties. He establishes networks, opens sealed tombs, recruits warriors not for glory, but for preservation of what little remains. Not all Necrons obey. Many resist. Some challenges return. And one by one, Szarekh defeats them, not with firepower, but with reason, with overwhelming calculation, with memory. He reminds them of what they were, of what they could be, of what they still might save. Not themselves, not their pride, but the galaxy that may still have space for logic, order, and perhaps one day, peace. Pause now. Let that settle, because the Silent King does not return in rage. He returns in sorrow, and it is sorrow that drives him, because he does not seek to rule the galaxy. He seeks to prevent its final death, and only he remembers how it died the first time. When the old gods fall silent, the broken must learn to speak again. Across the void-scattered worlds of the Necrons, the awakening begins, not in fire, but in shuddering light. Tomb complexes deep beneath irradiated crusts blink to life after 10 million years of stillness. Logic thought pulses down crumbling conduits. Mechanisms groan like the breath of dead titans. And within their eternal sarcophagi, the Necrons rise once more. But not all awaken as they were. Not all remember what they once served. And fewer still remember why. When Szarekh, the Silent King, returned from the black silence beyond the stars, he knew he would not find a single empire waiting. He knew time had fractured the unity he once wielded like a blade. What he finds instead is a civilization in ruin, not destroyed by enemies, but by entropy. Memory has decayed. Protocols have diverged. Even reason, once the Necron's greatest weapon, has begun to rust. The dynasties are no longer a singular will. They are kingdoms of delusion, arrogance, and fear, each dreaming their own version of supremacy in a galaxy that has long forgotten their name. And now Szarekh must remind them. He begins with diplomacy, not out of mercy, but necessity. The Mephrit dynasty awakens first. Lords of solar annihilation, their tomb worlds orbiting close to the hearts of stars. Their pharaons greet Szarekh with suspicion, eyes flickering like dying suns. They remember him, yes, but only as a myth, a god king who once brought both salvation and doom. They question his authority. They mock his exile, and when they demand proof of his dominion, Szarekh answers with silence, but his silence is heavier than words. He presents them with star maps they believed lost, records of buried tombs, schematics of their own internal command protocols rewritten and perfected in his absence. He reactivates their stasis locks with a single pulse from his throne node. He kneels before none of them, and they fall into line, one dynasty reclaimed. But the Mephrit is only the beginning. Szarekh turns next to the Nihilak, cold, calculating lord of icy tomb worlds who believe themselves heirs to perfection. Their logic is brutal. Their arrogance is unmatched. They see themselves as the purest expression of Necron destiny, and Szarekh as a relic. When he arrives, they challenge him, openly, a trial of supremacy, ancient, sacred, and binding. He does not decline. He does not speak. He simply enters the arena. The Nihilak expect combat, blades, fire, death. Instead, Szarekh activates a quantum mirror array, flooding the arena with a holographic replay of the final days of the war in heaven, the fall of the Tan, the betrayal, the screams of their own ancestors as they were fed into the biotransference furnaces. He shows them what they are. Not kings, not gods, prisoners. He strips their pride bare in front of their own nobles. And when he finishes, he leaves the arena untouched. No blood spilled, no blade drawn. But they kneel because Szarekh fights not with power, but with truth. And truth, for an immortal, is unbearable. But not all dynasties can be reclaimed with logic. The Szarekh dynasty, most expansive, most militarized, has long considered itself the true inheritor of the Necron Empire. Its ruler, Imhotep the Stormlord, is not a mindless warlord. He is a genius, a strategist, and above all, a survivor. He does not yield, not immediately. When Szarekh reaches out, Imhotep answers, not with allegiance but with war. Tomb ships clash in the void. Cryptex duel across storm-racked moons. Two minds, both brilliant, play a game of galactic regicide across dozens of systems. Each move costing thousands of warriors. Each counter an echo of 10-million-year-old hatred. But Szarekh does not hate Imhotep. He respects him. In fact, Szarekh needs him. So he changes the game. He withdraws, allows Imhotep a temporary victory, lets him believe he has outwitted the king himself. Then, across 14 Necron tomb worlds, he activates hidden subsystems that unlock data cores Imhotep has been searching for since awakening. Maps of Tyranid movements, chronomantic calculations of warp rift expansions, coordinates of long-lost dynastic relics. Gifts, unspoken, unasked, but understood. Imhotep pauses, rethink, and finally answers with silence and alignment. One more dynasty brought back in the fold, not through fear, but through respect. But not all can be saved. Szarekh turns next to the Maynarch, a dynasty long whispered of in fear, whose tombs fester with madness, and whose lords no longer remember what mercy meant. The Maynarch had once been brilliant. Philosophers of pain, scientists of death. They embraced biotransference not as necessity, but as ecstasy. They enjoyed the shedding of flesh. And now, what remains of them is a blasphemy of machine logic and malevolent hunger. When Szarekh makes contact, they respond with horror. They have rewritten their command protocols entirely, severed from the Triarch. They no longer serve unity. They serve entropy, and they see Szarekh not as king, but as prey. The war that follows is not swift. Szarekh, for all his brilliance, cannot reclaim what has willingly embraced damnation. He sends envoys disassembled. He offers reasoning, ignored. Finally, he launches a surgical strike. A tesseract-laced containment barrage on their capital tomb world. He does not seek to destroy. He seeks to contain. The Maynarch cannot be redeemed, but they can be isolated, entombed again, this time forever. And so he orders it, not as vengeance, as for mercy. And as the last of their shrieks fade into stasis, Szarekh turns away. His court says nothing, but within each of them, something old stirs. Doubt, because though they have followed him across the stars, through genocide and exile, even now, the Necrons do not fully understand what drives their silent king. They know he does not seek power. They know he does not speak of glory. But in his gaze, they see something deeper, a wound. And in that wound, the question, what does he hope to find? What future does he see for a people who no longer dream? The dynasties begin to unite, not as one empire, but as a purpose, a cause, not conquest, not supremacy, but survival. Szarekh continues, system by system, planet by planet, seeking lost tombs, reactivating ancient forges, gathering minds who can still think beyond themselves. Some call him a fool, some a savior. He accepts neither title, because titles do not matter anymore. Only one thing matters now. The galaxy is dying. The warp thickens with every passing cycle. The Imperium collapses under its own weight. The Tyranids devour without pause. And in the farthest reaches of void, something darker than even the tan stirs, a hunger not of matter but of unbeing. Szarekh sees it coming. He remembers the first end of the galaxy. He will not allow another. not without standing in its path. And for that, he needs them all, even the broken, even the mad, even those who hate him. Because the Silent King does not fight for his crown. He fights for the right to remember. There is no resurrection, only remembrance. And remembrance is agony. In the silent corridors of the tomb world of Salamis, Szarekh stands before a mirror that does not reflect, not because it cannot, but because it dares not. It is forged of hyperglass, layered with anti-quantum fields so dense it renders the concept of observation meaningless. It is not made to show a face. It is made to trap what that face has become. And in its dark surface, the Silent King sees nothing of the Necroner he once was. No eyes, no flesh, no soul. Only the echo of a choice made 10 million years ago. Only the reminder of what was lost. The Necrons do not weep. Their tear ducts were burned into vapor. Their faces, once expressive, have been calcified into death masks. But still, there are moments, glitches in the algorithms, when their forms twitch, when their silence cracks, and something older tries to remember. Szarekh has studied these anomalies, not to fix them, to understand them, because somewhere within the circuitry is grief, and grief is proof of what once was. He does not allow these memories to be deleted. He catalogs them. He watches as warriors awaken screaming, without mouths, as cryptecs shatter their own fingers in spasms of phantom pain, as overlords whisper names long extinct, their voices modulating through corrupted vox grills. The biotransference was not perfect. It was never perfect, and that imperfection may yet be the Necron's last sliver of salvation. He walks the undervaults of Salamis, past archives etched in molecules and data crystals the size of cities. He walks past the sarcophagi of forgotten thinkers, dormant minds still replaying ancient debates in endless simulations. He walks until he finds it, a vault he has not opened in over 10 million years, a memory chamber. Inside, suspended in gravitic stasis, is a single Necrontyr body, flesh, bone, dead, and yet more alive than any metal shell walking the galaxy. It was his, the last tissue sample of Szarekh before the pact, before the machine, before the silence. He ordered its preservation on the day of his ascension, not out of vanity, but fear that he might forget what warmth was, what pain was, what mortality meant. He stares at it now. He reaches out with a metal hand that once trembled. Now it cannot. He tries to feel, but the sensation doesn't come, because even memory has limits. And yet, a thought flickers. Could it be reversed? Could the Necrons reclaim what was taken? He has spoken of it to no one, not even the Praetorians. But in the deepest core of his intellect, a war rages. He remembers the biotransference engines, their shrieking furnaces, the cries of billions as their souls were liquefied, compressed, devoured. He remembers the Tan, laughing, feeding, transcendent. And he remembers the pain, not his own, theirs, his people. He had told himself it was for their good. He had believed it. But now, surrounded by machines that still echo their screams, he wonders, what if the soul cannot be reattached? What if what was lost is lost forever? Would he still do it? Would he choose it again? The answer comes not from his own mind, but from the tomb world below. The cryptech Illuminator Siras, once a genius of Necron biology, now a mad alchemist of living metal, sends word. He has progressed in his forbidden experiments. He has found a way to replicate emotion in neural patterns. He claims he is close to reinstating the soul. Szarekh arrives at once. He descends into laboratories of madness, where Necron warriors are fused with unknown biomass, where metallic skulls grin with surgically implanted eyes that weep molten tears. Sira's bows, mocking or sincere, it is impossible to tell. He shows the Silent King his work. A Necron, once a common warrior, is suspended in a stasis field. Its body shudders uncontrollably, its metal limbs twitching. Its eyes, normally dull green, flare red, blue, then yellow and erratic pulses. It is a feeling, not properly, not truly, but enough. Szarekh watches, and for the first time in millennia, he fears, not for himself, for what he has done. Sira's explains. He has found remnants of quantum soul imprints within certain Necron minds. Tiny fragments, not consciousness, but echoes. And if those echoes can be isolated, amplified, cloned, then maybe, just maybe, Necrons can become alive again. Not in flesh, but in spirit. Szarekh leaves without a word. He does not stop the experiments, but he does not endorse them. Instead, he returns to his court and orders silence. He begins compiling what will become the Codex of Sorrow, a vast record of the Necron civilization before the fall. Names, memories, achievements, songs, poems, all digitized, all immortalized, not because he believes they will be used, but because he cannot bear to forget them again. He releases select passages to the dynasties. A poem, a child's drawing, a log of a dead starship captain who once tried to chart the edge of the galaxy because she dreamed of stars no one else had seen. Some Necrons ignore it. Others pause. They do not understand why, but they pause. And sometimes that's enough. Not every dynasty welcomes this. Some see it as weakness, a betrayal of the logic that has kept them alive. Szarekh does not argue. He never argues. He simply watches, waits, hopes, and wonders beneath his ever-silent helm what the price of redemption truly is. Because the truth is not that Szarekh wants to restore the Necroner. It's that he doesn't know if he should. The galaxy is a different place now. Flesh burns. Faith is weaponized. Demons hunt for minds, not bodies. And the Necrons, soulless, emotionless, are uniquely immune to these horrors. Would restoring what was lost only make them vulnerable? Would bringing back the soul doom them? He does not know, but he remembers. And sometimes that is enough. Sometimes memory is the only thing that must survive. Because perhaps one day, when the last demon dies, when the warp is silenced, when the stars grow quiet again, there will be time to build, not empires, but meaning. And if that day comes, Szarekh will be ready, not as a king, but as a witness, a custodian of a race that forgot what it was, and now just maybe wants to remember. He sought redemption. The galaxy gave him war. The stars are not quiet. They never were. Even in the darkest void between galaxies, even in the crypt silence of the Necron tombs, the galaxy churns with war. For every system that dies in stillness, a dozen more erupt in flame. Across 1 million battlefronts, armies clash not for survival, but for hatred, pride, ideology, and madness. Szarekh, returned from the abyss, did not come to fight, but the galaxy does not care what he came for, and war finds him all the same. The first blow does not come from the orcs, nor from chaos, nor from the Tyranids. It comes from humanity, that brief flicker of defiance that calls itself the Imperium of Man. They do not understand what he is. To them, a Necron is a soulless automaton, a machine born of hatred, a living tomb. And when Szarekh's fleets appear at the edge of Segmentum Obscurus, when his command nodes stir long-dead tomb worlds back into calculated order, when a single wordless signal causes an entire planet's orbital defenses to shut down, they do not see a mind. They see a threat. The Imperium responds the only way it knows how, with fire. Within weeks, 6 Astra Militarum battle groups are deployed. Within months, 3 chapters of Adeptus Astartes. They launch coordinated assaults on reawakening tomb worlds. They do not speak. They do not ask. They attack. And the Necrons defend. Szarekh orders containment, not retaliation. He transmits command protocols to limit the activation of tomb defenses. He reroutes energy away from planetary extermination systems. He does not give the order to counterattack. But his nobles are not him. The overlord of the Thok dynasty, insulted by the humans' impudence, activates a star flare device on the planet of Carthel Prime, killing 10 billion in less than a second, not for victory. For message, Szarekh hears of it moments after it occurs. He arrives before the dust settles. The air still glows with residual plasma. The crust of the world is split. The surviving Imperial Guard forces, half blinded and deafened, lie scattered like broken dolls across a continent that no longer exists. He does not speak to the Thok overlord. He simply walks through the devastation. And when he reaches the epicenter, he kneels, not in grief, but in something older, recognition. This is what he used to be, and now it must be ended. He deactivates the Thok Command Corps. He severs its link to the dynastic network, and he locks its ruler, still screaming protocols of war and vengeance, inside a quantum labyrinth from which it will never emerge. His Praetorians do not question him, because the war Szarekh fears is not with mankind. It is with himself. But the Imperium does not see the nuance. To them, Carthel Prime is a massacre, and a massacre demands vengeance. Now comes the full wrath. The Inquisition brands a Necron resurgence as a Xenos crusade. The Ecclesiarchy screams of soulless devils rising to claim the stars. And worse, the Adeptus Mechanicus begins to covet. They want Necron technology. They send covert strike teams to tomb worlds, hoping to extract data, knowledge, forbidden tech. Szarekh sees it unfold in real time, and he does what no Necron has done in a million years. He sends a message, not a surrender, of understanding. A signal pulsed through the black, encoded with mathematical precision that no human AI can replicate, but some can decipher. A message not of peace, but of warning. Not your enemy. No further explanation. Just a pattern. A plea. A boundary. And still, the Imperium presses on. Why? Because it cannot do otherwise. It is a dying empire, ruled by fear, ruled by a god emperor who no longer speaks. And when you cannot understand something, you destroy it. So Szarekh prepares, not to retaliate, to shield. He activates the Triarch's oldest protocols, subsystems designed not for war, but for emergency insulation. Planets are phased partially into subdimensions. Cities vanish into null space. Armies that should have woken are left in slumber. He tries desperately to minimize the bloodshed, but he is one will, and the galaxy is chaos. Elsewhere, chaos stirs. The demon Primarch sensed the Necron resurgence. Magnus the Red peers through the tides of the warp and sees a presence that should not be. Mortarion rages at the thought of an untainted realm of order. Abaddon begins to whisper of ancient enemies returned, and the Chaos Gods hunger because the Necrons are not part of the warp. They resist it. Their soullessness is not a weakness. It is anathema. To Slaanesh, they are silence. To Nurgle, they are stillness. To Khorne, they are precision without passion. To Tsench, they are unreadable. And so, for the first time in eons, the ruinous powers converge not to tempt, but to destroy. Warp storms bloom like ulcers across space near Necron tomb sectors. Infected worlds attempt to breach Necron defenses with demonic contagion. But Szarekh has seen this before. He has fought gods. He does not fear them, but he does fear what they leave behind. Entire systems become battlefields not of strategy, but entropy. Necron legions engage demonic hosts in battles where time bends and logic collapses. In one system, the war lasts a single second and also 1,000 years. In another, reality itself folds, and Szarekh must deploy dimensional anchor rays just to keep the ground from screaming. He watches it all, and he whispers in the silence of his command throne, "This is not our war." But still it is, because now the galaxy sees him, and they cannot look away. The orcs, ever drawn to conflict, begin to amass. Word of the Golden Metal King spreads through the green-skinned tribes. They do not understand what Szarekh is. They do not care. They want to fight him. For fun. And as tendrils of Tyranid fleets edge toward the Necron domains, as Eldari Harlequins send cryptic messages warning of ancient consequences, as Genestealer cults infest long-lost Necron vaults in grotesque mockeries of resurrection, Szarekh comes to understand a bitter truth. He cannot avoid war. He cannot silence the galaxy, but he can choose what to become within it. He does not raise his hand to command conquest. He raises it to defend, not out of nobility, out of necessity. Because if he falls, if the Necrons splinter again into warlords, if the old arrogance returns, then the galaxy will lose more than a king. It will lose balance. And in the absence of balance, the warp will feed. So the Silent King prepares. He sharpens his legions. He activates sleeper protocols. He does not strike first, but he ensures he will not fall second. And in the depths of his core, where memory still lingers, he dreams, not of triumph, not of victory, but of a galaxy that no longer needs him, and of a time, however far away, when silence will finally mean peace. To walk forever is not to live. It is to carry the weight of all who died standing still. Szarekh does not sleep. He cannot. Not because he lacks the biological necessities. His body no longer remembers exhaustion, no longer feels the ache of nerves or the pulse of blood, but because rest requires peace, and peace is a concept he has long since buried. In the black halls of the Crown World is said, where time flows like ice through dead corridors, he walks without escort, not as a sovereign, but as something older, a shadow, a silence given form. Each footfall echoes down vaults built before the first human crawl from Terra's seas. These are the halls where his court once debated, once dreamed. Here, Necrontyr philosophers ponder mortality. Here, astronomers track the soul paths of the stars. Here, Szarekh made the choice that damned them all. And now, only silence answers. Statues of flesh-bound ancestors line the passageways, none of them metallic. Szarekh has ensured that. Each face carved from crystal, preserved in the moment before biotransference. A gallery of the doomed. He passes by each one, not with reverence, with guilt, because Szarekh has become a monument to contradiction. He leads an empire of immortals, yet remembers mortality more clearly than any of them. He commands unity, but was the architect of division. He is worshipped, and does not believe he deserves to be followed. Each decision now is a wound. Each command, a scar across memory. He has not spoken aloud since his return. His orders flow through the dynastic lattice, perfect in their clarity. His voice is unnecessary. His will is enough. And yet, there are moments when he stands before the stasis vaults of still dormant tomb worlds, systems where billions of his people sleep in the illusion of purpose. And he almost activates the vocal protocols to apologize. But there are no words for what he did. There never were. In the deep core of said lies the Nexus Reliquary, a chamber only Szarekh can access. It holds no weapons, no fleets, no data worth stealing. It holds the last surviving quantum-stable recordings of pre-transference consciousness. Not minds, not personalities, dreams, flickers, the echo of what it once meant to feel. Szarekh visits it often. Inside, holograms bloom like memories made visible. A child running across a desert balcony, chasing a solar kite. A matriarch standing atop of a salt ziggurat, reciting the first mathematical hymn of the Necrontyr. A soldier dying on a battlefield, not with bitterness, but with pride, knowing her death will be remembered. Szarekh watches them all, and he does not move, not until they fade, not until the room dims. Only then does he return to his throne, not of gold or fire, but of logic, crystal, and zero-grav filaments. A throne that does not elevate him. It connects him. Every Necron system, every dynasty, every command node. He feels them like phantom limbs. He feels the slow turning of Szarekh forges, the glitch laughter of the Tyrellian war fronts, the crackling madness of the Maynarch, locked in their eternal prison of stasis and entropy. He feels it all, because that is his curse. Not to rule, to remember. Each time a warrior awakens, Szarekh sees a flicker, the second of confusion, the breath of identity that almost breaks through the programming. And then it is gone, suppressed, filtered, necessary. He could change it. He could reprogram the control nodes. He could reintroduce emotion, destabilize the protocols. Let the Necrons feel again, but they would go mad. Most of them would not survive it, because the feel, after 10 million years of emptiness, is not healing. It is fire, and Szarekh has burned his people enough. So he waits, he watches, he chooses when to intervene. Not constantly, not with control, but guidance. When Imhotep, the Stormlord, launches a campaign against High Fleet Kronos, Szarekh sends no commands. He merely adjusts the targeting matrices, ensuring the weapons strike where they'll cause disruption, not extinction. When Trays in the Infinite opens a vault and accidentally releases a gene plague that could destabilize 3 sectors, Szarekh reroutes the containment fields from his personal stasis energy reserves, draining his own systems to protect species he has no alliance with. Why? Because the galaxy does not need a king. It needs a conscience. And in all the void, Szarekh may be the last one left, even among his own. His Praetorians, ancient, loyal, incorruptible, watching with expressions that do not change. But he sees the doubt, the confusion, the pain behind their perfect obedience. They do not ask questions. They do not speak. But they know. They remember who he was, who he is, and who he is trying to become. He does not ask their forgiveness, because they are no longer built to give it. And that may be the greatest tragedy of all, because Szarekh does not seek power. He does not crave empire. What he seeks is atonement. But in a galaxy where gods scream and mortals pray to corpses, atonement is meaningless. Only survival matters. Only strength. But he remembers another way. He remembers cities built not to dominate, but to endure. Music composed not for worship, but wonder. Science pursued not for supremacy, but curiosity. The Necrontyr were not always cruel. They were sick, dying, desperate. Their curse was not ambition. It was pain. And pain breeds monsters. Szarekh has outlived his people, but he has not outlived their meaning. He carries it, not as a weapon, as a burden, because the stars have not forgiven him, and he has not forgiven himself. And until they do, until he can look into the mirror that shows nothing and see someone, he will not stop. He cannot stop, because the galaxy is ending. Again. And maybe, just maybe, a broken king can still stand between it and the abyss. No throne awaits me, only a reckoning. The galaxy spins in agony. From segmentum solar to shattered stars beyond the halo zone, it burns, crushed beneath the weight of its own despair. The Imperium tears itself apart, besieged on all sides. Demons claw at the veil between dimensions. Hive fleets gnaw at worlds like maggots and bone. Eldar prophecy stumbles. Orcs multiply. And the Necrons, ancient and relentless, rise again in rusted majesty, but not as conquerors. Not under him. Szarekh, the Silent King, no longer dreams of empires. He dreams of endings, not of destruction, but of closure. He now stands on the bridge of a tomb ship beyond the galactic plane, watching a warp storm consume an Imperial system once vibrant with life. He does not smile. He does not rage. He calculates logs, files it with thousands of other systems lost in madness, and he prepares. This will not be a war of glory. It will be a barrier, a final act of defiance against the end. Szarekh has begun construction of the final wall, a defense not around his empire, but around the galaxy itself. A series of phased dimensional anchors and anti-warp pylons, based on the ancient technologies first used on Cadia and the Pariah Nexus. He sends orders not as king, but as warning, to every Necron dynasty that still listens, and even to those who do not. Build, resist, do not conquer, not now. He contacts none of the younger races. No envoy to Terra, no emissary to Ulthwi, no parley with the Tau. He knows they would not understand. Their lifespans are too brief. Their vision is too narrow. They see the galaxy as a battlefield. He sees it as a dying patient, and he will not let it pass alone. In the vaults of his personal sanctum, Szarekh opens a final protocol, an emergency failsafe he wrote before his exile. It is a singular command, a contingency for when there is nothing left to salvage. The code name, Solstice. If activated, it will sever all remaining stasis vaults from the galactic lattice, permanently sealing entire tomb worlds away in micro-dimensional vaults where they will never be reached. It is not salvation. It is a funeral, and it is ready, but he has not pressed it. Not yet, because deep in the void, something stirs. Not a threat, a signal, faint, fragmentary, incomplete. It comes from the edge of Necron comprehension, a language embedded in null entropy fields, skipping across dark matter veins like a song hummed by the galaxy itself. It is Necrontyr, but older, uncorrupted, pure. Szarekh traces a signal to an unlisted vault on a dead world buried beneath warp storms. What he finds is not a weapon, not a god, a child, a Necron warrior barely activated. Its mind is different, unchained by the standard command protocols. It speaks, haltingly, but it speaks. Its voice quivers. It asks questions. It feels. It is not insane. It is not corrupted. It is the first Necron in 10 million years to feel pain and choose not vengeance. Szarekh kneels. He listens to it speak of dreams, broken, hazy, incoherent, but unmistakably emotional. It speaks of memory, of being someone before the metal, of seeing starlight and feeling awe. And in that moment, Szarekh does something he has not done since before he became king. He remembers awe. He returns to sit in silence. He deactivates Solstice, and he begins again, not with armies, not with tombs. With hope, he will find more like the child. He will rebuild the Triarch, not as overlords, but as custodians. He will not force the dynasties to obey. He will guide. He will not seek to destroy the Imperium, nor save it. He will stand in the middle, between the abyss and the edge of history, a final sentinel. The galaxy will not know him. They will not see the wars he prevents, the demons he starves, the worlds he quarantines. They will curse his name, and he will endure it, because Szarekh is no longer a king. He is atonement, and if the stars burn out one day, if the galaxy collapses into silence again, he will be there, to remember, to mourn, to bear witness, to hope, in silence, forever.